The military side is fundamental. It is itself based on economic and technological prowess. I would say most of the breakthrough technologies of the last 75 years in the United States were military based. I was thinking, why do we have such shitty trains in the U.S. Where you can't even reliably take a train from New York to Washington without it breaking down someplace? And it's because the military doesn't care. And so we don't put in the technology that China has put in, for example, for its nearly 50,000 kilometers of fast rail. The military just doesn't care about this in the United States. Where it does care, well, we've had the internet, we've had the digital revolutions, we've had microcircuitry, we've had remarkable technological advances, almost every one of which has been originated by the Defense Department in the United States. This is quite interesting. God forbid we should spend some money on human civilian purposes, but we're told by our libertarian-minded politicians that's a waste of money. But if we spend it on the military, it's salute the flag and get the money spent. And there are civilian spillovers as well from it. But it is the mindset, which is nothing is too good for the military. So ultimately, it is the military, because you look at the Middle East, who is on the U.S. sides, where the U.S. has military bases. It's regimes that feel that the U.S. is protecting them. Protecting them from what? From other countries, from their own citizens, who knows? But in any event, it's where the military bases are. What enables the U.S. to have those military bases? Well, $1.5 trillion of security spending per year. If you add up the Pentagon, the CIA, Homeland Security, the other intelligence agencies, veterans, and so on, you're at about $1.5 trillion a year. That's a lot. By the way, it's within reach of China, and it's not a unique number. Of course, Russia can't match it, though Russia's no slouch at this game. Europe doesn't try, because this is part of Europe's system to be vassals of the United States in trade for protection, a kind of feudal structure of security relations. But this power is real, but in my view, it's not dominant. And Russian technology is really powerful. And even the Houthis can send missiles into Israel. The Houthis. It's Yemen. That's not China. That's not the cutting edge. The Iranians have hypersonic missiles. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. North Korea is an extremely sophisticated, militarized state. The most recent terrifying novelistic scenario of nuclear war, which I recommend to everybody, by the author Annie Jacobson, called Nuclear War Scenario, which is a very science-based account of how the world can end, begins with a missile attack on the United States from North Korea. It's absolutely one of the plausible scenarios. And so the idea that the United States stands alone or unique in this, I think, is hugely naive. And again, though I'm no military expert, I am I think a pretty good observer of technology over the centuries, having studied this for decades. One of the ways that the U.S. and before the U.S., Britain projected its power globally was not only the network of bases, but the Navy. And the Navy was deemed to be key to be able to move assets. Well, the Navy, in my view, again, I'm sifting through the expert opinions of others, is hugely more vulnerable than it was 10 years ago because of missile technology and space technology. And these big aircraft carriers can be blasted out of the sea, most likely. And they were supposed to be the whole base of U.S. power projection. So I hate the foolishness of American officials blithely talking about war with China in the coming years. But my own view is, if we survive it somehow, because maybe it would be the end of the world, but if we survive it, we'd probably lose the war, as most war games have shown.
Jeff, on this question about the U.S. and the Middle East, to switch to the Middle East a little bit. So you've said that the U.S. is delusional, or U.S. policymakers are delusional in their view of, grand strategy, in their view of a unipolar world that will last, in their view, forever. That seems to be the thinking. But what if we shifted to the Middle East and the perspective of the Middle East, where when people looking from the Middle East, will often say, well, but the U.S. is the dominant power. It has this military capacity you've talked about to bludgeon people into, or at least to try to bludgeon people into submission. So how does your thinking about U.S. delusion square with the reality that we see in the Middle East, which is essentially quiescent regimes, the changes in Syria, the crushing of the Palestinians? Yes, and of course there's resistance as well. So I'm wondering how that works in on the one hand, and on the other hand, the question of Israel. I mean, is Israel an outpost of the U.S., or is there something different about the Israeli-U.S. relationship?
I think both the U.S. and Israel are delusional about the long term. It's true, in the short term, they can kill a lot of people, kick the shit out of a lot of people. And the U.S.-Israeli alliance has been nonstop war. The best way to understand Netanyahu is very simple, in my view, which is that his political movement, the Likud, is based on one idea: never a Palestinian state, and therefore Israeli control permanently over the land from the river to the sea. And that actually is the charter of the Likud from the very start. The idea that this is a Palestinian chant, not an Israeli chant, is a little bit of the twist of our narratives, but it's the Likud that talks about from the river to the sea, of course, and that's the goal. Then Netanyahu came into power in 1996, and what was the strategy? The strategy was, well, we're going to keep everything. They're not going to like it. There will be resistance. There will be Hamas. There will be Hezbollah. There will be other military resistance. Don't fight them per se. Just overthrow the governments that support them. Because as Netanyahu, I think, rightly said in the 1990s, it's not the militants or what they call the terrorists that are the ones that are the danger. It's their state backers. War is a big business. War is not an insurrection. Sorry, no matter what people think. War is an organized state activity that costs tens or hundreds of billions of dollars and depends on advanced technologies. War is a big game of big players. So Netanyahu's idea was, well, yeah, we don't like Hamas and so forth, but that's not the real story. The real story is the regimes that back it. And I have always been struck by what Wesley Clark told us many, many years ago about his visit to the Pentagon in September 2001. 7 wars in 5 countries, in 5 years, excuse me. That list came from Israel. That wasn't a U.S. Of course, Paul Wolfowitz and Doug Feith and others are part of this strong U.S.-Israel right-wing alliance. And the 7 wars, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Libya. We've done the list. Netanyahu's had 6 out of 7 so far, and he's gunning for the 7th. And he may get it, the war with Iran. So that's the basic idea. I think, pretty clear. Most big ideas don't get hidden from view. People like Netanyahu like to write books about them, bragging about what they're going to do. And Netanyahu's bragged about taking down the Middle East. He shows us maps at the UN of the good guys, which are the ones with U.S. military bases, and the bad guys, which are the ones that support the Palestinians. And we're just going to completely uproot the bad guys. Now, what has happened? What has happened is, yes, they've made a killing field across the Middle East. No results in terms of really remaking the Middle East. I quoted Tacitus recently. They made it a desert and called it peace. What have they done? Is Lebanon at peace? Is Syria at peace? Is Somalia at peace? Is Sudan at peace? Is Libya at peace? Is Iraq at peace? No. These are killing fields. These are bloodbaths. These are not normal states. This is the handiwork of the United States and Israel by design. But it doesn't produce the political outcomes. Now, here we are in the midst of a genocide going on in Gaza. On the one side, it is, I can't call it impressive exactly, but it is a fact that almost the entire world understands this is a genocide and says so, and bemoans it. And you have statements by every group imaginable, by the Arab League, by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, by the G20, by the BRICS, by the UN General Assembly, and by the UN Security Council, but for the US veto, against what's happening. So public opinion, such as it is nearly universally aghast at this, as it should be. But it goes on every day. And this is part of the drama and the mystery. This is the first prime-time, full video genocide in history, where we watch it every day. We watch the gloating of the Israeli Defense Forces. We watch the genocidal statements of the Israeli leaders. We watch the shameless, pathetic performance of American politicians. And one thing I'll say, on January 20, at least I'm going to celebrate the departure of Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. Biden hasn't been there for a long time mentally, but these lieutenants of his have really done a job. They are really nasty or stupid or some combination of the two. So all to say, what does this add up to? Well, you can kill a lot of people, but in the end, this is not making, even forcing a long peace. And I don't believe personally that Israel survives this. I think it could survive and should survive a two-state solution. That's what I've advocated for decades and what I continue to advocate even for today, knowing all of the practical challenges. But I don't think it survives as the great regional empire in the Middle East. Zealots have a real way of self-destruction, and this is zealotry at work in Israel.
But when you say Israel can't survive, Jeff, I mean, do you mean it as, are you talking sort of ideologically? Are you talking ethically, morally? Or are you talking, since you're talking about power, do you mean in terms of what it's doing now will ultimately be unsustainable in the sort of medium to long future?
Yeah, but I should define my terms. I'm saying if we're looking ahead a quarter century from now, will greater Israel be the reality? Meaning, will there be a state of Israel that controls all the land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, if these people have their wish all the way to the Euphrates, because that's what it just says in Genesis. Do I believe that that's what the Middle East will look like in 25 years? No.
But
No
why do you
way.
assume that the Israelis want peace as opposed to domination?
They don't want peace.
Exactly. So
Now, that's the relevance of Tacitus, Osama, is that they made a desert and called it peace.
Right. They don't want peace. Or they want peace on their terms. But in the end, Israel will not determine the state of affairs of the Middle East, nor will the United States alone, though it thinks that it will. In the end, it just won't be a Jewish state acting as a regional empire. It's not in the cards. It violates too many international laws, too much global opinion, too much even primitive ethics, not to kill tens or hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. Most people believe that, actually.
we agree with you 100%. I think the world agrees with what you're saying. But the question is, like, when you say two-state solution, could we push you a little bit on that and ask you why, after all that has passed, should anyone advocate for? I mean, the two-state solution in a sense is gone because the Israeli colonization of the West Bank and Jerusalem is so extensive. Why not advocate for a single state, given the fact that we're talking about hypotheticals here, a single state where everyone has equal rights? Why should anyone be advocating for two states, one of which would still be, in theory, a supremacist state?
Because we are one vote away from a two-state solution that could end killing. It wouldn't end this question of whether the two states should become one state, whether there should be a federation, whether in the end it will become one state. And I think that it may well become that way. I have no problem with it myself becoming that way. But I believe in political terms, there was a vote, basically 170 in favor of two-state solution in the General Assembly, and a few opposed, essentially the U.S., Israel, Micronesia, Nauru, Paraguay, Argentina, and depending exactly on the vote, sometimes Czech Republic and Hungary, sometimes not. In other words, about 95% of the world has said two-state solution. The G20 this year said it. The BRICS said it. The OIC said it. The Arab League said it in Bahrain last year in Riyadh. The United States is, from a juridical point of view, the only blockade to that, not Israel. Israel cannot veto two states. I am not calling for a peace process, by the way. We've had a peace process for 57 years. I'm not calling for a peace process. I'm not calling for negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. That is the least relevant, conceivable approach. I'm calling for the United States to change its veto, to be aligned with international law, global diplomacy, and the overwhelming opinion of the American people. So this is what I'm calling for. Now, what does that mean in practice? With a sovereign Palestinian state on the borders of the 4th of June, 1967, with control over the Islamic holy sites, with the capital in East Jerusalem, it means that there will be a state of Palestine and a people of Palestine and a place for Palestinians to live. Will it mean eventually one state? It could very well, by the way. It could mean a confederal arrangement in the future. It could mean two states that hate each other for the next 30 years, but don't kill each other. But to my mind, it would mean the end of this Israeli I don't know, so many words come to mind, but this zealotry and this militarism with the world saying no more, Likud, no. There's going to be a Palestinian state, whether you like it or not. This is not your choice. This is about international law, and this is about peace for all the rest of us. Thank you. And you just have to live with it.